Welcome on in to another edition of the Between the Hash Marks podcast. As always, I'm Matt Lombardo, and back from the deathbed, my good friend, my pal, my mentor, the purveyor of the Two Deep Zone, Mike Tanier joins me once again. Better than ever, Mike. Glad to have you back.
Glad to be back. By the way, the vets had to shave my dog's ass today. How's your day going?
So you're doing better than the dog at this very moment, is what you're telling me.
I'm worried that the dog caught what I had. I'm very worried that it was in my throat and in my chest, but it's on his ass.
It's a terrible place to be sick.
The worst place. Most of us are on our ass. My dog now has a hairless ass. It's like Jean-Luc Picard back there around the tail. It's a shame.
Beautiful. A couple of weeks ago over Thanksgiving, Tigger was hanging out here, our cat, when Sophia made the Thanksgiving Day picks, and she went 3-0, by the way. So good on my daughter. But maybe the hairless ass of your dog will make an appearance today at some point on this podcast as well. We've gone completely off the rails before we've even had the chance to get started. But if you do like the show, if you stick around, I promise we have a good one on tap for you.
For some reason, if you like the show, leave a 5-star review, like and subscribe. We have antibiotics we have to give for our pets and things, so we can use the support from our viewers and listeners.
Absolutely. Leave us those 5-star reviews and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. You can check us out on YouTube, my YouTube channel at Matt Lombardo 975. And it's a mandatory subscription if you're listening to Mike Tanier's Two Deep Zone on Substack. And you can check out Between the Hash Marks on Substack as well. Some great content coming up in the coming days on both of our Substack newsletters and websites. And it was really, Mike, I went into Sunday with very low expectations. I said to my wife, I said to de facto editor / fill-in podcast host Joe Stazak that, this is a pretty underwhelming slate of games. And next thing you know, the Vikings look like the Randall Cunningham 1998 Vikings. The Rams look like the Rams that went to Super Bowl 48 against the New England Patriots. The Bills kind of stumble a little bit. The Seahawks look like the Legion of Boom. And it became a really fun Sunday where Aaron Rodgers and the Jets were finally put out of their misery.
Yeah, it was nice to see that. And you're right. It was full of compelling, odd little tales. The Kirk Cousins homecoming turned out to be everything you would want from a Kirk Cousins homecoming. Him going out there and kind of being Kirk Cousins and making everyone sort of laugh at his tomfoolery. And it ended with another murky, sloppy, grungy, what are we even watching? Chiefs victory that remained a Chiefs victory. Another comeback at the end, another division title for a team that you kind of love to hate and hate to watch at this point.
Exactly. And we're going to get into the Chiefs a little bit later on, but I wrote in the column, can we all stop with the hand wringing now about the Kansas City Chiefs? We've been watching the same movie at the Metroplex for close to a decade now with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. I think we all collectively have gotten in our heads that this is this like dominant team that browbeats their opponents every week and wins 30-10. And it's this explosive offense. That's just not really who they are. What we're seeing this year with the dominant defense and the last minute comebacks and the one-score games and figuring it out, that's kind of what the Chiefs are and always have been. But our minds, I don't think, process it that way.
Have been for the last 2 years. They really were that explosive team in the past. But there's two elements of it. One is I would have believed it if the defense looked dominant. And the defense didn't look dominant until parts of Sunday night. Before that, they were very vulnerable, especially for stretches of all of these games. That's part of it. And secondly, this isn't supposed to be sustainable this long. At some point, you've got to win by more than 2 points. Like if you are a Super Bowl team, if you can't do those things, you're not supposed to be that thing. But we'll talk about that, I think, a little bit more in a few minutes.
Yes, we will. But one team that I'm starting to buy into a little bit more is the Los Angeles Rams. And that game on Sunday was kind of an afterthought with the Bills going in there. The Rams were kind of this plucky upstart NFC West team. I think you half-heartedly gave out the NFC West crown to the Seahawks a couple of weeks ago in the column. And now you look up and Matthew Stafford's playing the best football of his season. He has 12 touchdowns and no picks over the last 4 weeks. Puka Nacua is doing Puka Nacua things. Cooper Kupp is doing Cooper Kupp things, including throwing one of the more menacing blocks you'll ever see on Nacua's go-ahead touchdown. They're playing unselfish football right now. Stafford's delivering in the clutch with a 4th down pass that he had to have, followed up by the touchdown pass. And this feels, Mike, like vintage Sean McVay a team getting hot at the right time, riding the momentum, and who knows what happens when you get that hot into the postseason.
Yeah, and my worry about them right now, the reason why I haven't bought in, by the way, I just want to give you the numbers right now. The Rams, according to DVOA analysis at FTN, have a 39.9% chance of making the playoffs. 39.9%. The Seahawks are at 50.9%. The Seahawks are a game ahead of them, although the Rams beat them earlier, so there is a tiebreaker there.
Yep.
The reason I'm not like blown away by this team and I'm very reluctant to embrace them is they played the Eagles a couple weeks ago. And there were a lot of the same elements. Stafford was very solid in that game. Puka was uncoverable in that game. Eagles won handily. And I believe it was a week or two before that when the Rams played the Dolphins, who are not as strong a team as the Bills or the Eagles. Puka was uncoverable. Stafford played pretty good football. It was the same team. It wasn't like an injury-plagued version of the Rams,
Right.
and they lost. So I have a feeling this team, when the highs are high, that was about as high a high as a team can have, stomping on the Bills for much of the afternoon like that. They're that team. When they slide, and they slide a lot, they're not going to be a playoff team, and I don't think they have the margin of error right now because they lost too many games earlier in the year. And they're coming up on a very tough Thursday night game.
Yep, and there's really no margin for error. And you mentioned the Thursday night game. They have the San Francisco 49ers. And that, look, we can say what we will about the 49ers. You had a stat that you posted on Threads at Mike Tanier just this morning before we went on the air. The 49ers somehow, some way, trail only the Baltimore Ravens in yards per play on offense, 6.32 yards. So that's no gimme for a Rams team that is really playing well, and the snowball was building momentum and rolling in the right direction. That's no gimme against a division rival that kind of blows my mind that the offense is functioning at as high a level as the yards per play indicate that you put out there.
They have been all year. And by the way, the 49ers still have a 7.5% chance of making the playoffs by running the table because they're facing a lot of these division foes in the games to come. They're extremely hungry. They're extremely angry. Okay. This is a team that lost a lot of opportunities early on. If you look at their statistical profile, it is a statistical profile of a top 10 team in the NFL. Obviously, they've had a bunch of injuries. Their offensive line is all messed up right now. They've gotten a few guys back on defense, I think. But going into Candlestick Park on Thursday night with a team that really looked like they had something to prove and wanted to make a statement last week against the Bears, the Rams, I'm not going to embrace the Rams in any way until they survive that one with a win, because that looks like the kind of game where it's like, oh, we played neck and neck with this opponent. They beat us at home. And all that stuff we did against the Bills was like, we caught the Bills, cross-country game.
Sandwich game,
opponent that's unfamiliar, et cetera, and we got the better of them. So very much in wait and see mode about that Rams team.
The reason why I think that I'm a little bit more optimistic about them, and again, it's an uphill climb. A 30% chance to make the postseason is no guarantee by any stretch, and you have no margin for error.
Right.
But fortunately, if they get through San Francisco on Thursday night, they still get the Arizona Cardinals, who, look, I was so high on them about a month ago, but it seems like whatever Jonathan Gannon was selling, it was a short-term fix, and it seems like the players have kind of checked out a little bit. Then you get the husk of the New York Jets that they've long since deceased, but just officially buried the Aaron Rodgers epoch on Sunday in Miami. So you could conceivably get 2 wins there. They have the 21st ranked remaining strength of schedule overall, and week 18, you get the Seattle Seahawks.
Right.
And if things break out a certain way, that week 18 might be a de facto NFC West championship game, which would be a win and in situation.
That would be the night game.
Yes, has to be, right?
That would be the night game. I mean, I hope not, because otherwise it's going to be some NFC South Falcons nightmare. So please don't let it be that. But you're right. They have to get through this. They have to get through this, and they have to hope the Packers help them a little bit, because I think the Packers get the Seahawks. And then they can do it. But yeah, there's a lot of like about the Rams. Nakua, the more you watch them, the more impressed you are. Their defensive line is full of these young guys who just fly after the ball. I think they're still figuring it out, but when they do, good Lord, this is going to be a defensive line like the Steelers have been putting out there for years. And it's a strong team. I don't think that they've helped themselves enough earlier, and I don't know about the consistency of sustaining a performance like we saw on Sunday.
And the potential opponent in that potential NFC West championship game is the Seahawks. And They're another team that you watch them every week. And I think even dating back to the Arizona game in Seattle a couple weeks ago is when they really got on my radar. On
Mhm.
one hand, they're ahead of schedule with Mike McDonald. That
Mhm.
defense is punching above its weight. I really love Kobe Bryant, by the way. That dude's just an interception factory week after week. And on offense, no Kenneth Walker, but Zach Charbonnet comes in and Zach Charbonnet runs for 134 yards, couple scores, a 50-yard, rumbling and bumbling touchdown explosion.
Mhm.
And they've got the pieces. But Mike, their remaining schedule feels like their roadblock. Minnesota, Green
Mhm.
Bay, the Rams, the Bears. You almost have to go with, as well as the Rams are playing right now, you almost have to go 500 over that stretch with one of those wins being over Los Angeles, right?
You would think so, or the two first games, the Packers and Vikings, are both home games in Seattle. So you get your little break there. You got to get one of those wins. And you got to demonstrate that you are as good as a division title as the wild card teams coming out of the NFC North, which are incredible wild
Yeah.
card teams. The Seahawks have to show that, but they're a better team than they were at the beginning of the year. You mentioned Kobe Bryant, Devin Witherspoon's another big part of that secondary. Very deep secondary, very deep defensive line. Where you talk about Leo Williams, Boye Mafe, they're like the keys to it, but they've got talent kind of across it. And you look across the entire roster, and it's not the Seahawks have no great strengths, but they're a hard team to defend one way or the other. They have three good wide receivers. They've got a couple of good backs, and Gino is fine. He's a perfectly capable veteran, and they got a big guy back a couple weeks ago, and that's when they got on our radar. Right tackle Abe Lucas, who was hurt the
Yes.
entire first half of the season. They had some guys out there who could not play. They could not protect Geno Smith. That impacted everything they do. Lucas is fine. He's a good, solid NFL starter. So now they have a good start, normal, regular offensive line, and that makes them. They're like the tortoise to the Rams' hair.
Yeah.
They're slow and steady. They can go in, and again, they get one of these wins in the next 2 weeks. I don't think that's too tall an order. Then I think they've gotten it sewn up.
No, I agree. And I think that, you look at what's happening in the NFC North and in the NFC West, they're the two most compelling divisions in football right now. I mean, the AFC North is getting there with what the Steelers are doing, and Burrow's Bengals are coming on strong, and the Ravens are lurking out there. But the North is sending three teams to the playoffs in the
Yeah.
NFC, and the West, it's trending towards these two teams potentially being on a collision course. And that's I love that kind of football this time of year where it's meaningful playoff spots on the line, and these are two really playoff caliber teams in the Seahawks and the Rams.
Yeah, I wish there was more of it. I wish there was more of it, but the bottom's fallen out of so many of these other teams. I was looking at this Sunday schedule, and it's kind of like a sicko special with the number of like 3-8 versus 3-9. I'm going to be a pig in slop watching some of these games along the way, but I wish there was more of it. And what I'm trying to do, NFC West teams in particular, less so the NFC South teams, because I think that's a one and done playoff team, is can anyone stop the wild cards in the NFC? Because the wild cards in the NFC are going to come in and they're going to lay waste to some opponents. Commanders and those two NFC North teams are going to lay waste to some opponents and route to facing the Eagles or the Lions.
Are you worried about the Eagles at all? Because I think that when we look at what's happening with the top contenders, we've talked about the middle of the road teams and the wild card teams that are in the mix. There are some cracks that might be starting to emerge with some of these contenders. Are you worried about what we've seen from the Eagles the last couple of weeks, particularly Sunday, where they played way down to their level of competition and almost got run out of the building by the Panthers of all teams, that as well as Bryce Young is playing? I did
Mhm.
not expect that to turn into a rock fight.
It shouldn't have turned into a rock fight. The Eagles defense played well. The Panthers kept Houdiniing on 3rd and 13 from their own end zone, and 4th and 2, and the ball gets batted in the air, and Adam Thielen lands on it, etc. But we both have to be worried about this passing game, right? It sounds like the Eagles themselves, sounds like AJ Brown and some of these other guys are worried about the way their passing game is proceeding.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you talk about some of the concern about AJ Brown and whether or not Jalen Hurts is on the same page. A good friend and mentor of mine, Sal Palantonio of
Yes.
ESPN, Sunday night put out a post on Instagram. I included it in the column on Monday morning that it's the sixth consecutive game where the Eagles had more rushing yards than passing yards. Jalen Hurts was sacked 4 times, finishing just 2 of 5 for 30 yards against the blitz, and that's against Carolina. And
Mhm.
Mike, if the Eagles are going to get to where we think that that roster is capable of getting and get through a relentlessly blitz happy Aaron Glenn led Detroit Lions defense along the way, teams are going to blitz, and they're going to have better pass rushers against the Detroit Lions, against the Minnesota Vikings, in particular against Brian Flores, against the Green Bay Packers. I don't know. Watching that team right now, I think that Saquon Barkley erases a lot of the issues, and we've seen him do that time and time again against playoff caliber teams. Green Bay in the opener, against the New Orleans Saints, who kind of fell off, but they were playing the best football in the league in the first 3 weeks of the year. The Rams in LA. Saquon Barkley has erased a lot of concerns, but this offense, it seems like if it's not broken, there are some cracks that are starting to form.
Whatever happened to playing jump ball pitch and catch with AJ Brown and Smitty? Whatever happened to that?
Yeah.
It seems like for 2 or 3 years we would watch, hey, you know what? You got a one-on-one up the sideline. Just go take it, go take it, go take it. And those would convert into touchdowns in big games consistently. You see almost none of it now. You see Hurts hesitant to pull the trigger on those balls, and I'm not sure why. I think the matchups had to be there against the Panthers. The Panthers have one good cornerback.
Yes.
Oh, and there's 2 good wide receivers, which means one of them has the favorable matchup. But you would see the hesitate double clutch, and that's where the scramble, the throwaway, the sack would come in. Also getting these weird decisions by Jalen where he decides he's going to run some kind of draw, which is fine, and he runs into Lane Johnson's back, or he gives up what looks like a 5 or 6 yard hole and tries to bounce it outside. Like it's almost like he's in a different headspace.
There was also a bizarre play that it was in the fourth quarter of that game, and he was scrambling towards the sideline. And rather than throwing the ball into the 5th row because you're out of the pocket, he seemed to give himself up. And, I have a lot going on Sundays. You have a lot going on Sundays. I got the 3 TVs with NFL Red Zone and 2 separate games going. So I wasn't necessarily dialed in
down, right,
to Eagles Panthers. Like that wasn't on my radar, but I saw that play unfold and I'm thinking, well, why? Why would you slide in the backfield when you could have just thrown it to an opposing coach or into the 5th row,
right,
and not giving yourself up for a 9-yard loss?
No, so I look at that entire sequence. So I was watching that a little more carefully because I think Kirk Cousins had just thrown his 2nd interception, and that one was so I was checking off some boxes, and that was still close. Earlier in that drive started with an RPO pass to AJ Brown, fake handoff to Saquon or Gainwell. Bang, comes out 12, 13 yards. Like, okay, that's good. Then they ran another play to Saquon. He got 8 or 9 yards or another first down. They tried to run the RPO again. I swear it was the same play. Yeah. Jalen fakes it, and he looks over, and it looked like somebody had dropped into like that little hook zone where you're in trouble if you throw that. So, okay, Jalen doesn't throw it to A.J. Brown, another double clutch, but it's an RPO. There's no place else to go with the ball. So you're right. It's you've got to take off and run. Now, in my brain, what I think he was thinking is it's 4th quarter, it's late, force them to burn the timeout. The problem is, you're right, it's an 8 or 9 yard loss, and you're in field goal range, and the field goal wins the game. So it's like this combination of not really having the situation down.
Yeah.
He makes that mistake. And that mistake probably wouldn't even be on our radar if he wasn't double clutching earlier in the game, where that wasn't costing the Eagles points. And if the Eagles, again, weren't in the situation where they did a great job after that, they played punt and pin, that was fine.
Yep.
They weren't in this weird situation where Bryce Young gets away from 3 finger tackles and in his own end zone and completes a 25-yard pass on 3rd down. So there's a lot to be worried about there. And again, in the NFC, you have to worry about how good the Vikings are, how good the Commanders are, and how good the Packers are. Where you can't say, we're the number 2 seed, but we're fine. We're going to get to the 2nd round. You have to be optimized, and the Eagles are not optimized.
No, and you talk about the Commanders. It's going to be a different Commanders team that goes into Philadelphia for a playoff game should they make it that far. A, because they've been battle tested to even get to that point in the 2nd round, and B, because Jaden Daniels was not healthy the last time on that Thursday night game, still dealing with some of the rib injuries. They're coming off the bye week now. You'll have at least a month between those 2 games. So if it's Washington, it's going to be a more prolific offense you're going to need to keep up with. If it's the Packers, look, they went toe-to-toe with Detroit, and Jordan Love is playing at a franchise quarterback level, and that defense continues to play really, really well. If it's the Vikings,
Yeah.
We're betting on Sam Darnold coming back to earth, but I just watched him toss 5 touchdowns to the most prolific wide receiving duo in the sport with a mastermind defensive coordinator blitzing quarterbacks more than anybody blitzes quarterbacks from every conceivable angle against a quarterback in Jalen Hurts, who now is struggling monumentally against the blitz. So you're right. It's not just about what happens if you get to Detroit. You have to get to Detroit.
You have to get to Detroit, and that's it. I think the Eagles are better than all these teams when their passing game is humming. Now, and by the way, I looked at the numbers, and I believe the Eagles are 14th in DVOA, in passing DVOA. It's not so much disastrous right now, but again, it's just not the way it should be. It looks like there are opportunities being left on the table consistently, and that's the thing you can't do against these high quality opponents. You don't have, the Dolphins coming in, or whoever's going to be in the AFC, the end of the playoffs, the Chargers. You don't have them coming in. You have a team that's going to beat you if you're not playing at your full potential, and that's where the Eagles are right now.
And you look across the country in Los Angeles on Sunday night, we touched on what the Rams did and how impressed I was with that win. The Bills, I don't know about you, Mike, that loss did not change one iota of what I think about the Bills, because you had them dashing through the snow and punching Brock Purdy and the 49ers in the face repeatedly on Sunday night. You had this colossal potential Super Bowl preview in Detroit that I don't care how much you want to have a 1-0 mentality. You got to be peeking ahead at that game against the Lions a little bit. And you had Matthew Stafford playing at a Hall of Fame level. It just seemed like it was bad juju, a bad spot for the Bills, and yet they still posted 445 yards of total offense. Josh Allen still passed for 342 yards, rushed for 3 scores, threw for 3 scores. First player since Otto Graham to ever do that. First player in the modern era to do that. They checked a lot of boxes. They just came up short. It's not like they rolled over when the Rams decided that they were going to turn this into their Super Bowl. The Bills answered back. It wasn't enough. And sometimes in the grand scheme of a 17-game season, that happens.
Yeah, sometimes you come out a little flat, you get a kick blocked, it's a scoop and score, and then time runs out on you at the end. And I feel the same way about the Bills. It's funny because I was like looking through the comments on the Too Deep Zone, and I said there's nothing to worry about for the Bills except for the fact that looks like they're losing this chance to get home field advantage through the playoffs. And that's significant, but it's like, well, if that's your only worry, you're fine. And then I was looking at some of the comments, and some of my readers were like, this Bills team, their defense, it falls flat in these situations. They make this mistake. And nothing the person was saying was false necessarily, but it's like, well, I guess there are Eagles doomers in Buffalo too. They're just Bills doomers. It's like every home team has their doomers, I think, except maybe the Lions right now. But if you take the bigger look at that team, Bills are the best team in the AFC, and it's just they have to prove it when the time comes late January.
And they're probably going to have to prove it going through Arrowhead. And you look at what the Chiefs are doing. I was the leader of the hand wringing brigade over the past like 3 or 4 weeks, and I had Chiefs Kingdom all up in my mentions on Threads, on Blue Sky, in the Instagram DMs, in Substack notes, anywhere and everywhere. The pitchforks were out from Missouri for Matt Lombardo because of my doubt and my concern over Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes just squeaking by and not getting style points. That was a really good Chargers team that they survived against. And I know that Justin Herbert has long been a Mike Tanier nemesis and public enemy number 1 in the Too Deep Zone. But he played really well on Sunday night. And at one point, 11 of 12 in the second half, they took their best shot and still missed. And, it's not like that was the Raiders that they did that to. It happened the week before on Black Friday. It's not like that was the Jets that happened against, or the Dolphins, or the Falcons on the cusp of a potential quarterback change. It was the Chargers. And it just seems like this is who Kansas City is. They seem to survive when it matters. They won on a game-winning field goal against the Eagles in a Super Bowl with 8 seconds left. They had to go to overtime against the 49ers and needed Mahomes heroics to bail them out. And if I'm betting on anybody to have heroics when it matters, it's Mahomes.
Right.
I'm back in. I'm done hand-wringing. I'm passing that baton off to somebody else.
And what it is for me, and like everything is sort of like what's actionable, what's objective with me, like what's provable, what can you put a $10 bet on, etc. That's my whole Herbert thing. It's like give me something that Herbert's going to do that I can bet on,
Yeah.
and then I'll bet on because not just I think he's awesome and that throw is great. Give me a spread, give me an award, give me an over under because he never seems to reach them. But that's neither here nor there. The Chiefs don't seem to reach them too, but they win now. Right now, they're 0-7 against the spread in the last 8 games. So bet against them.
Yeah.
So bet on the other team and take the points and whatever, but don't think in terms of, well, this has got to stop. This has got to fail. This is going to run out because you're right. We've had 2 years of this. There are things that we don't necessarily measure they're good at. Aaron Schatz pointed it out on our DVOA podcast at FTN yesterday. They lead the league. Their offense leads the league in success rate. Success rate is simply like, 1st and 10, you get a 6-yard run. 2nd and 5, do you get a 4-yard run? Do you convert on 3rd down? The Chiefs lead the league in that. You would never think that.
Their 3rd down percentage, I wrote it in the column on Monday morning, 52%. Who converts 3rd downs at 52% clip? Now, again, we want to talk about clutch moments and how do they keep getting this lucky? They're getting lucky because they're creating those situations because even when the backs are against the wall, they convert and they keep the chains moving. Mahomes was dead to rights on that 3rd down jump pass to Travis Kelce, but he escapes in the pocket, finds Kelce, bring in the field goal kicker, doink off the left upright and in, go home happy. It's what they do. They convert 52% of 3rd downs. When you're doing that, you're going to win your fair share of games because you're staying ahead of the sticks.
You're staying ahead of the sticks because you're making a lot of 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 3s, and they made 1 or 2 of those to milk the drive, so the Chargers didn't get a second chance. When the Chargers had opportunities in that game, they would get to the 30-yard line and get sacked. Or run one of these ridiculous hardball Roman sequences where they start out with a handoff so that 2nd and 9. Like, let's make sure we get 2nd and 9. We got to get Gus Edwards his touches here.
Yes.
Do things like that. And the Chiefs have been very good at not doing that. So, what do we got next week? I think we have a 4-point spread against the Browns. I can't find it right. Take the Browns. Take the Browns.
Not on the money line. I'm not on the money. I ain't taking.
Oh, not on the money line. Don't bet the money lines. Bet the spread because you're going to get. And 4 is low. I don't know what it is. I can't pull it up right now, but I saw 6 earlier. Do that. Do it against the Texans, whatever. And then just like the Bills, worry about it in late January. Don't worry about it here. They're not going to fall off any pace that matters. What's going to matter is the last 2 games of the season.
And then here's the other thing. You look at Josh Allen, I believe he's 3-1 or 4-1 against Mahomes and the Chiefs in the regular season.
Right.
0-3 in January. So again, until somebody beats the Chiefs, until Patrick Mahomes is walking to midfield and there's 4 zeros on the clock and the confetti isn't golden red, why would I bet against this?
Right.
Why would I think that this run is going to end?
And why would I worry about it? Why would I fret or do anything else like that? If you're a Bills fan and you want home field advantage, worry about that. If you're a Texans fan in 2 weeks, because that's a big game, worry about that. The rest of us just enjoy the ride. It's going to be murky and mucky and weird, and you're going to get sick. We got sick of hearing about Brady magic, but it kept happening.
Yeah.
We're sick of hearing of Mahomes magic, and it keeps happening. Deal with it. If you don't like it, watch the other game.
And the other game this weekend, which we'll get to in my circular game, is Lions-Bills. We're going to get an up close and personal look at the Bills against their best competition of the year outside of Kansas City. Are you worried about the Lions? Because here's me talking about both sides of my mouth again. On one hand, Dan Campbell is aggressive, bordering on recklessness when you're going for it on fourth down from your own 30-yard line. Going for it with the game on the line, I didn't mind as much because you drive the stake through their hearts, and that's what you do. The Lions team seems to feed off of the aggressiveness. It's brought them together. They've forged this identity around it, and people want to say that aggressiveness is going to cost them. I kind of lean the other way, that when they're not aggressive in those spots, that's when they almost give games away and when they cough games up like they did earlier this year against Tampa Bay.
I go back to last year when the trick play failed for Dan Campbell. I forget, against the Cowboys maybe. So they kept pushing back in penalties. And he kept going for it, and it stopped making any sense. It's like, dude, it's 4th and goal from the 26. We're going for it. Like you get a little bit of that, and it really is counter analytical after a while. But of course, teams have been counter analytical and winning Super Bowls for years. As long as the team is responding to it and it's a logical identity for what they do. That it's not kind of like early season Sirianni or like old Brandon Staley, where it's a random fourth down generator and you don't know what's coming. This is who we are. Offense prepares for it. Offense practices for it. Defense expects it. Everybody, the fans are behind it. Everything, do it that way. I'm not worried about Dan Campbell's aggressiveness. I'm worried about the Minnesota Vikings.
Yes. Yes.
On the Lions, yeah.
I mean, and they're a machine right now. I mean,
Yes.
we touched on it earlier. Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson combined for 5 touchdown catches against the Falcons. Jordan Addison, he was probably the number 1 receiver on 20 to 25 teams around the league.
Yes.
And he's the number 2 opposite of Justin Jefferson. It's an embarrassment of riches. And
Mhm.
Sam Darnold, you and I cracked jokes all through October and November about, hey, when's September going to end? He has 1 or 2 bad games. Those September's in the rear view.
Yeah.
You look up and he's the catalyst. Sam Darnold is the catalyst for that team. Boy, oh boy, is that going to be a fun rematch, because they went toe to toe with them the first time around earlier this year.
Absolutely, and they've got the tough defense, and the offensive line is playing pretty well. And I've been watching; they play penalty-free football, and especially when they're in Skull Country, man, it's like a home field advantage in terms of the penalty advantage there for the Vikings. But Sam Darnold isn't the catalyst; he's the Garoppolo. I mean, when you're watching, like literally, Addison is like running around.
Where's the ball?
Yeah, where's the ball? Yeah, and Jefferson's where's the ball, and the defenders are like falling around, like they're coming through for him. That's not saying Darnold is playing badly by any stretch. That would be silly. But in terms of what's happening here, you're right. Addison is probably a top 15 receiver in the NFL. Jefferson's a top 2 or 3 receiver in the NFL. Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, like they're able to distribute the ball to all these different guys. That defense is so complete that the only thing stopping them from being the team we're all talking about is the Lions.
Right, and God forbid you fall behind by 6 points in the fourth quarter. You're gonna face cover 0 every single snap, and you're gonna get sacked twice on a possession every possession, because Brian Flores is a mad scientist, and Jonathan Grenard is playing like he's on the outside looking in of a Defensive Player of the Year, award. The secondary is playing really well. They're a fun team to watch. They're an explosive team to watch. I don't know that they can knock off Detroit, but if that's a playoff game at some point, man, I'm going to be glued to the TV for that one.
Right. In the short term, the Lions, who in normal situations would be looking at this Bills game and saying, yeah, it's a Super Bowl preview, but the stakes aren't phenomenal. Now, they can't let up in any way along the way. And that's worth keeping in mind for both teams if you're trying to bet that game. If you're saying, well, could the Bills have another trap? Well, the Bills, I don't think, are going to get trapped twice in a row.
Right.
But the Lions aren't exactly saying, you know what? Dan Campbell isn't a let up kind of guy anyway.
And the Lions are coming off the mini bye week, having played last Thursday night. So you're getting the Lions with extra rest.
Yes.
You get kind of a beat up and beleaguered Bills team off of a late. You love a primetime game, cross country, and now going back to the middle of the country game against the Lions. And you want to talk about this being a team Super Bowl? This is the Detroit Lions Super Bowl in a lot of ways. At least that's my sense for a fan base. When was the last time they had a game this big in their building with a Lions team that's this good? And you look at the thin margin for error that they have for the number 1 seed in the NFC against what the Eagles are doing, what the Packers are looking like, what the Vikings are. It almost seems like that game psychologically and from a standing standpoint means a little more to the Lions than it would for Buffalo, who might look at that and say, tough game. Maybe we see these guys in February. What do we want to put on tape that they could learn from for that game? Non-conference game.
Yeah, I'd be more worried about the Lions sort of peaking.
Yeah.
Last year they had 2 home playoff games. 2 tough home playoff games, including the Rams and then the Buccaneers later, and they won those. So I think this team is not going to look at this and say, this is this is that, this is the other thing. But the stakes are these are not the Chiefs. They can't let up and be like, well, no one's in second place. We're fine. And I think that's the Lions realize that. It's going to be an exciting game. I know it's going to be probably your circlet game. It's not mine, but like obviously this is popcorn for a fan, for somebody who's not sitting there saying, I need a take. I need a take off of this game. I need something to spin forward for you don't watch football, drink beer, watch this game. It's going to be great.
CBS is going to be there for the pregame show right outside. I mean, it's an event.
And Aaron was saying this, and it's like, I put in a credential for the Super Bowl. I don't know if the NFL will accept me anymore. I don't know if I can afford it. But imagine going, and you're put in the same boat, really. Imagine going down to New Orleans and it's full of Lions fans and Bills fans.
Talk about a party. You and I on Bourbon Street with Bills Mafia and Lions fans, we might not sleep that week.
No one will sleep that week. And the thing is that Bills fans in New Orleans in January will be sweating. They'll be wearing shorts and cutoffs and they'll be like dehydrated because it's not -5 degrees below zero. But boy, will they be happy as they smash everything in their wake. So fingers crossed. I mean, I'm not rooting for any particular team. Philly Super Bowl would be great too, but fingers crossed we get down there and see something exciting.
No doubt. And, one of the teams the Bills have to be a little bit wary of, or at least keep one eye in the rearview mirror looking at, is the Steelers. And
Yeah.
I have no real concerns about the Steelers. They just seem to keep chugging along. And if there were ever a case for Mike Tomlin to be coach of the year, finally, it's this year after making the switch to Russell Wilson when they were 4-2. And, you look at what that offense has become with Russell Wilson. But on the other end of that is George Pickens. And he's been the spark that lit the fuse of that explosive offense. You might be looking at being without George Pickens for a couple of weeks here.
Right. And I think that's a worry for this team. That changes the dynamic against the Eagles, certainly, because I think that's going to be a defense slugfest at this point. But when you take away the one guy that the Eagles would really be worried about covering, that matters. The Steelers are kind of not fortunate because they brought it on themselves. The 2-game lead they have over the Ravens, thanks to their success, thanks to the Ravens' self-tripperization over the last couple of weeks, is huge because I think the Ravens could close that gap when the Steelers don't have George Pickens at their disposal.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And the Ravens are a team that, again, I think they're better than their record indicates.
Yes.
You lose to the Chiefs by 1 score because Isaiah Likely's toe doesn't land in bounds. And, Saquon Barkley makes the play late in the game in a potential Super Bowl type of preview. Some of the losses along the way, it just seems like the Ravens, they belong in that upper pantheon conversation alongside the Steelers, but you lose one of your playmakers like Pickens, it opens things up a little bit.
Right. And the Ravens are a little bit like the 49ers who didn't completely trip over themselves. I posted earlier yards per play. Ravens are number 1 in yards per play, but you're talking about the games they lost to teams like the Eagles and the Chiefs, where it's like, yeah, all right. You lose to the Browns because of a bunch of turnovers and dropped interceptions. You lose to the Raiders because of a bunch of penalties and all. And that's why you are where you are. Steelers generally avoid the Steelers lost to the Browns in the snow as well, but generally avoid losses like that. They put themselves in this position. I guess the question is like neither of us can like really dig up and the Steelers are a threat to the Chiefs and Bills. It's hard to dig that up, especially when we're looking at that injury report.
Right. And they're just one of those teams that churns along and they do Steeler things. They run the ball well. They play really good defense. They have playmakers at all 3 levels on defense. Would it surprise me if they beat the Chiefs and survived? It'd be mildly surprising. I'd be shocked if they could beat Buffalo. But you're right. You start taking away weapons from that type of a team and you start to dramatically lower the margin for error. And there's 3 teams in the AFC that have almost no margin for error just to get in.
Yes.
You told me to make my pitch for one of the Dolphins, the Colts, and the Bengals.
Yes.
I made my pick off air with you. Which of these 3 teams gets in your opinion? Who are you plopping your $5 bill on with your long shot playoff wager?
Well, first of all, I hate all these teams. I don't hate them personally, but I kind of want them to go away. I don't want them to go away because it's nice having something to talk about for the last month of the season. But give me a moment here. I'm trying to pull up the final schedules here. And I am trapped going with the Indianapolis Colts. And here's why I'm trapped going with the Indianapolis Colts. They get the Broncos. Granted, good Broncos team in Mile High this week. After that, they're currently 6-7. The Colts have the Titans, the Giants, and the Jaguars. Okay. Also, they are 5-4 in the AFC, and they've got a couple of wins. They've got a Dolphins win, which is useful from a tiebreaker standpoint. And the other tiebreaker scenarios are not good. So this is not a good team. This is not a team I like. But if anyone doesn't hold serve, if the Chargers fall off, Ravens, I don't think are going to fall off. If the Broncos fall off, it's going to be because they lose to the Colts on Sunday. And that's who I got.
Yeah, and they, according to the NFL.com playoff odds, they have a 24% chance of making the postseason. They have the best odds of any of these three teams.
Mhm.
I'm not ready to let go of my Bengals faith. Now
Oh
it's blind
God.
faith, it's misguided faith, but Joe Burrow has a lot of those same Patrick Mahomesian qualities that until he's truly dead, the Bengals have a pulse, in my opinion. And they answered the bell against the Cowboys on Monday night, a Dallas team that treated that Monday night game like it was their Super Bowl because their season was on the line. And Burrow still delivered in a clutch moment on that touchdown pass to Jamar Chase in the deciding moment of the game. Now, Amani Aurora muffling that punt and making a Nate Newtonian decision on it.
Leon Lettian, yes.
Leon Lettian, yes. That certainly helped. But, you look it up, and Joe Burrow is quietly having a terrific season. Did you know that he's leading the league in passing with 3,706 yards? He has 33 touchdowns and just 6 interceptions. That's 4 more than Lamar Jackson, second place in touchdown passes, 3 fewer interceptions than Lamar Jackson has thrown. And if the Bengals had a defense, any defense at all, 11 guys who were competent on defense, then my Joe Burrow preseason MVP at Bet365 might have the option to cash out right about now. Now, they don't have a defense, and that's the problem here. But they get the Browns, they get the Titans. Who knows what happens against Bo Nix and the Broncos? Maybe Nix realizes that he's a rookie quarterback at some point, and they have a divisional game against the Steelers, which divisional games, anything can happen. 2% chance of making the postseason. But if I'm just looking eye test and I'm looking at who do I trust more, who do I believe in more, it's Burrow and it's Chase and it's the Bengals.
Yeah, I think Burrow is second or third in DVOA or DER right now. I don't have it in front of me. Meanwhile, someone on YouTube is explaining why Justin Herbert is better than him. But we're going to let that go sit on the sidelines there. And I get your eyeball test element of things, but unfortunately, it's too late in the season for the eyeball test. You got NFL.com at a 2% chance. We're going to cut that in half. The DVOA analysis only gives Cincinnati a 1% chance of reaching the playoffs. And that's unfortunately because of services rendered early in the season, where this is a team. First of all, they're a game behind both the Colts and the Dolphins right now. So they're at 5-8, where everyone else is at 6-7. That's a big deal with only a few games left to play. And then you look at their losses early in the season. Head-to-head loss to the Ravens, head-to-head loss to the Chargers, and overall 2-6 in the AFC. So if there becomes like a tiebreaker cluster hump, the common opponents and the division opponents things are all going to stink. So hey, this is a team that can't tie the Chargers and make the playoffs. That's the problem. They can't tie the Ravens. The Ravens fall off. They've chopped off too many of their avenues. Again, I love what Barrow's done. Love what Chase has done. You're right. That defense sabotaged them. They're an interesting team to look at beyond 2025 because what do?
Right. And what do you do with T. Higgins? Burrow gets up to the podium Monday night and says that we're going to move heaven and earth to keep T. Higgins here. I don't know that that's going to be enough.
Mike Brown don't have heaven and earth. The Bengals don't have heaven and earth. They've got whatever money's in the in the vault right now, and it's not as much as the teams in free agency have, and that's a problem. But this year, I can't advocate for that team. Again, I hate the Colts. I don't hate the Colts. I hate the Colts. Okay.
There's nothing compelling about the Colts. They do nothing exceptionally well. Zaire Franklin is a playmaker. He's an all-pro every year.
Yeah.
I like Zaire Franklin. Michael Pittman Jr.'s okay.
Richardson throws a lot of downfield passes. There's always something happening.
Who knows what the hell he is, right?
Yeah. I mean, they land where they land, sometimes in someone's hands, sometimes out of bounds, sometimes in the parking lot or whatever. But it's kind of interesting to watch. But it's not a well put together team. That little thing they did with Flacco for a couple of games solved nothing. They seem kind of directionless, and yet they've got this little bit of a win here, a win there. I think they still have a path to the division, which gives them a little extra juice in terms of the playoffs. And frankly, if I have to make any pick, I'm going to say, well, we've already got it set. It's going to be Ravens, Chargers, and Broncos. But we got to keep an eye on these teams because they still matter.
And who knows, ball bounces the wrong way down the stretch for a couple of games, for a couple of teams. Anything can happen, almost anything. Who's your circlet game this weekend? Who you got?
Well, I decided to go with all the games but Steelers, Eagles, and Ravens against the, I mean, excuse me, and Bills against the Lions. These games are going to be exciting. We're going to love them. They're going to get too much attention because, again, at the end of the day, when we look at them, as fun as they're going to be, they're intra-conference games against teams that are pretty much all in the playoffs. That doesn't give us a lot of information. Buccaneers Chargers will give us a lot of information. Buccaneers are in first place.
Yeah.
Buccaneers are potential to win a division right now. That's an important game. We just mentioned Broncos Colts. That's going to tell us a lot about the Broncos as a wild card team, or it could keep the Colts alive and make them a serious a playoff team along the way. We have the Seahawks against the Packers. Again, that one has a lot of implications. We'll know more after Thursday night what's going on with that. We even got you, you got Dolphins Texans. All right, which at the beginning of the season looked like it would be something. Dolphins are not eliminated. Texans are vexing and whatever, and probably their division title. There's a lot of football that I'm going to be focused on and really interested in this week, besides the big ones.
I'm just annoyed that the two big ones are at 425.
Does that sink?
like my circle game is Lions Bills, but if you're putting together like the bracket, the game underneath it would be Eagles Steelers, because these are four Super Bowl contending teams that if you told me put those four teams in a hat, shake it up, pull out one name from each conference, I feel like I'm going to be watching the teams that are going to be playing in February on Sunday in the same time slot. Why? Why? If you're CBS, go own the 1 p.m. window. I hate Big Noon in college football, but Fox wins Saturday because they put the best games at noon. Michigan, Ohio State, noon. Penn State, Ohio State, noon.
Right.
Ohio State plays out of conference against Alabama, noon. Put one of those games at 1 p.m. and win the ratings war that day. I'm begging you.
I feel like that's the thing. You have to flex into the 1 o'clock window. Like, get that game out of the 1 o'clock window. Why? There are huge fans across the country, even on the West Coast. They're getting up, having their breakfast. They're used to seeing these early games. Put those in there because you're right, especially here in the Philly area where everything's going to be Steelers against the Eagles and people are going to be watching it. Keeping track of that other game is going to be hard. And then I'm worried about the number 3 game right now. I'm worried about the Broncos against the Colts. That's the one that could have playoff impact.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to find it. I guess YouTube Plus. I'm going to go through those things.
Gotta come over here. This is the weekend for the command center. Come on
Go to
over.
the
We'll
command
put it on
center.
the Bird TV.
I'm going to listen to it on radio through the NFL Plus thing. That's how I'm going to be doing that, and I'm going to watch the replay at 8 o'clock at night. So it's going to be fine. But still a heck of a weekend. But you're right. It stinks. At least stagger them like 4 and 4:30.
Yeah. Right.
So you
Right.
can watch both fourth quarters. Oh.
Yeah, something. But anyway, Bills, Lions, my circle game for all the reasons we talked about earlier. What do you got coming up on the 2 Deep Zone this week, Mike?
Well, this week I am focused, now that I'm back, now that I'm not hacking up, my lungs. I am focused on some teams going down the stretch. Tomorrow we're going to cover the Broncos, see how far they can get in the playoffs. It's really interesting how their wild card seedings could get them to Houston. Getting them to Houston could get them a victory and into the next round. I want to look at that. Got some stats about Bo Nix's development, etc. Then we're going to switch to the Green Bay Packers, another team looking at down the stretch who don't have any guarantees right now. Again, they got to win this game in Seattle to sort of lock up what we all assume is a playoff opportunity for them. And looking at them for real, because, we talk about all of their playmakers. Half their playmakers are injured right now.
Yeah.
So who is this team without Romeo Doubs and Musgrave? Love has been playing very well. What is their defense really like? Is it all Xavier McKinney? It's mostly Xavier McKinney, but what else is there? So I'm going to be covering all of that this week. What do you got going on?
Yeah, I have a pretty fun feature that I've put together after having conversations with a handful of people in buildings and agents who represent executives around the league, putting together the blueprint for sustained success across the NFL and which franchises are the top 5 front offices, GMs, executives running these teams, and how do they do it? What separates the Eagles and the Chiefs and the Steelers from the Giants and the Jets and the Dolphins? What is the delta there? Why are these teams so far ahead? How do we rank them? So I'm looking forward to that. That should drop on Wednesday or Thursday. We got the mailbag on Friday with questions from readers that I then, pose those questions to executives and scouts around the league to get their input on the answers. So a lot of fun stuff in addition to this podcast going live later today.
What's funny? I look forward to reading that, but when you do talk to these guys, they'll stress continuity, and then they'll be like, well, let's fire everybody so we can get some
Right.
guys who can bring in continuity. And it's like, I don't know how to explain to you what stupid decision you just made, but that's kind of how it often operates when they try to build these front offices.
And the big part of it for me is you look at a situation like Philadelphia, where it seems like every year there's this brain drain of talent of, high level personnel people that then get hired to be assistant general managers or general managers elsewhere.
Right.
And yet this is the big key. It's not just the continuity, it's being able to replace
Right.
talent that leaves the building with high-end talent that you believe in to keep the machine rolling. And not every organization has been able to handle that at a high level.
Right. Right. Well, I look forward to reading it. Absolutely.
Should be a lot of fun. Go ahead and follow Mike Tanier on Threads and Blue Sky at
Yes.
Mike Tanier. You can check me out on Blue Sky and Threads at Matt Lombardo NFL. Subscribe to the Two Deep Zone on Substack and between the hash marks as well. And of course, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please go ahead and subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating and a review. We'll read those reviews on the air in coming weeks. Those reviews and ratings really help grow the show. Mike, it should be a great weekend with some really big games on tap, and I'm looking forward to all of them.
I'm looking forward to it too. Now, if you excuse me, I gotta go put some ointment on my dog's ass.